All right, here we go. Obviously, good evening, everybody. And what's interesting, have you ever had a conversation with somebody, maybe even an argument, and then you walk away and you're driving home or you're just walking away and you say, "Oh, I should have said that," or "Why didn't I think of that then?" And I had that experience in regards to last week's or Tuesday night, since that was when we did this, that talk about laziness. And also I had a thought about desperation. And I don't remember because I did not go back and listen. It's been a hectic week. So I didn't go back and listen as to all the things I said about laziness. What came up was that being lazy comes out of obviously doubt and fear to some degree. And the fear is that of success, because if I apply myself, then I could become a success. And if my pattern is success failure, well, then obviously becoming a success is going to cause me rejection and deny me access to the doorway home, mom. Okay. So that was one of the things that came out. Another thing that came up for me was fear of knowing. And what stimulated that was at the trade show that I went to over the weekend, I had a long listen. I didn't do much talking. I listened to what somebody was telling me. And I walked away with, I don't know that the people hearing and reading things really check into it, really look into it. I don't know that they challenge what they should be challenging. I think that a lot of people take things for granted. Well, he's an authority, therefore, if he said it, it must be true. So I think laziness is part of that. And it may be the fear of knowing. I really don't want to know the truth. I'd rather believe in what I'm being told as what's going on. To me, that's the gospel. So I really don't want to hear anything else about it. So there was that. And to me, it borders on blind acceptance, which takes me to the universal teaching of the blind being led by the blind. There's a need to challenge. There's a need, even the work that I present, it goes back to something I've said about my consumer lectures, because I'll talk a lot about pantothenic acid or vitamin A and how fabulous it is for stopping a cold, even the flu. And it's your first line of defense. And then I'll tell people at the end of whatever I've covered, don't believe a word I've said, put it to the test. And in doing so, you'll know that what I've told you is the truth. More importantly, is that when you see that the information works for you, then you know the truth of the presentation. Then you know the truth of the information. And it builds confidence in you because now you're applying it and you're seeing it. So that was something else that came up. And then for desperation, I don't remember again if I said this or not, but I also thought about some things that happen with people, certainly with employees. I had one in particular that was going through something, and obviously people are very private and people keep things to themselves about what they're going through. Yet it came to pass that I saw what was going on. And I think that what happens, and this is what's known as a setup to some degree, that person wanted out of the situation. And in wanting out of the situation, set in motion something so that they would get caught, they would see it, they would be exposed, and therefore they would drop out or get fired, as the case may be, or separated from the company, or whatever the case may be, which is part of a universal teaching. And the teaching is Nothing shall remain hidden. Everything shall be made manifest. So no matter what's going on, that will come to light. And then while I was writing these things down, I was looking through some other notes that I had on my desk about stuff that I'm working on, and I came across things about symbols. And I don't remember if I've told you this, and even if I did, it's good to reiterate it, because you all need to get into the habit of working with symbols, because you'll develop eyes that see, ears that hear. So the three things I wrote down is that when something occurs or someone shows up in your life, you get a letter, you get a phone call, you get an email, you bump into them supermarket, shopping, whatever. When was that person in my life? When was this kind of an event in my life? What was I going through? What was I involved in? What do they mean to me? What did that situation mean to me? These are all, this is why I say why is the greatest word in our language, and the word that you need to constantly ask yourself, why? Why this? Why that? Which takes us to this evening. And that wasn't a planned segue, but it just worked out that way. Tonight, we're going to talk about the pattern of excess. And we seem to be a society that is definitely self-indulgent. The millennials, you know, it seems that they feel we owe them something, that they're entitled. And excess, when we apply it to the four selves, really, it raised a lot of questions for me, as you can see on the slide. So the questions that we have to ask ourselves are, in what ways are we excessive? And obviously, because I always say you, so I wrote, in what ways are you excessive? Do you crave attention? Now, we all know people like that who need to be the center of the party. There could be a conversation going on. This is probably in the social self, but it occurs to me now that, you know, they'll have the conversation drift towards them so that it becomes about them. So the question is, in what ways on an emotional level are you excessive? Do you crave attention from your partner? You know, that you need constant reinforcement? Do you need adulation and, you know, attention from your children? That, you know, they, you know, I'm your parent and you need to honor me and respect me and love me and shower me with attention and listen to my every word. And, you know, and then you can project it outward, and not so much on a social level, and you will, and we do, and we'll get to that, but in terms of getting attention at an emotional level. Because socially interacting is one thing. Interacting socially at an emotional level is something entirely different. Just like interacting socially at a spiritual level is something also different. This is why the self has four. Oh, I thought somebody had a question. Okay. That's why the self has four different perspectives, because there are, you know, the same concept has workings in each aspect of self. And again, from the emotional self, you know, the question also comes in of expectations. What are your expectations of others in regards to your emotional self? And is that excessive? Do you demand from others? You know, as a boss, you know, as a manager, as a coworker, do you demand from your workers, from your employees, from your managers? What? So it's really important to examine self and try to understand where the excesses are, because there's a universal teaching about excess, and that is excess leads to rejection, period. Too much of anything is no good. It'll get to you over time. And it'll affect you, which we can see in the physical self, where I've asked, you know, do you overindulge, again, excess in alcohol? You know, we know people who drink, obviously, you know, some people will have a drink at dinner, and that's fine and dandy. Some people, as soon as they come home, will have a drink, and then a drink at dinner, and then a drink while watching TV, and then a drink before going to bed. That may be considered a little overboard, you know. And if they come home for work during lunch and have a drink, yeah, you might say so. And a drink. Now, that excess has turned into a disease. We call it alcoholism. And the real question is, one, it is a pattern of excess, but again, it goes down to going back to the concept. What is at the root of it? What is the cause for the alcohol consumption? What does it do for you? Now, forgive me, I'm not, I use you because it's easier for me, because I don't think about anybody in particular. I think about the general you of the world. So please. So the question comes up, why are you doing it? And because on some levels, it's detrimental to the self, because alcohol eats away at the liver and the brain. And then the cells become addicted to it. And so it could end up affecting you on other levels in terms of expression, performance, materially, etc. Another excess that a lot of people get into, and I think on some levels, we're being programmed that way by the TV shows, and that is sex. It's, not every, but there are a lot of shows where, there are sexual scenes. And on some levels, it's made very casual, so it's no big deal. There's no real emotions involved. There's no love. It's just sex. And there are some men and women who both need a lot of sex to validate who they think they need to be or who they think they should be and are. And it could very well be a way of validating self from yet another point of view. Yes, I can perform. Yes, I am a man. Yes, I can, entice a man. Yes, I can make a man feel good. Yes, that makes me more of a woman. So again, everything in moderation, which is the other universal teaching that is very appropriate, because again, excess leads to rejection. So you want to do everything in moderation. There is a time and a place for everything and a particular amount for everything. But sex and alcohol and drugs, which is another one we indulge in, is out of whack in our country. And the questions come up, why? Drugs, we have no one to blame but on some levels, society, and other levels, the physicians, especially if you take a look at the opioid situation. They prescribe these drugs that are addictive. The real addiction is what the drugs do. And on some levels, it helps us deal with physical pain. And again, from a different point of view, that physical pain is really emotional pain. And what the drugs also do, even the legal drugs, pot, gives you a feeling of euphoria, lightheartedness. Actually, I always say that people who drink a lot alcohol, when the drinkers get drunk, they want to have a fight or an argument, seems to be. Not a rule of thumb, just seems to be my experience in viewing life over my lifetime so far. When people do the pot, they just want to make love. Everything is funny. They just want to have a good time. So there's a difference between the two. And I'm not saying one is, well, I do think one is better than the other, but from a different point of view, neither should be indulged in to the point that the alcohol or the drugs or the sex are detrimental to one's health. Again, we're back to everything in moderation. But some of the pharmaceutical drugs you become very dependent upon. Some of the illicit drugs like heroin and cocaine and crack and speed, meth are very addictive, and they're debilitating and they're killers, period. And of course, I put in there rock and roll because, and from a different point of view, on a physical self, when I have rock and roll, it just flashed on me about um, one has to party all the time, every weekend, every Friday night, Saturday night, got to be out there at a party, dancing away, whatever the case may be, going to concerts, and maybe even during the week. Hey, I saw there's a gig going on Wednesday night, there's something Thursday night. So some people need to be constantly busy, which is tied into other patterns, one of avoiding self, because if you're constantly out there doing things, you're not taking the time to examine self. You're not taking the time to bring self down to a place of calm, to a meditative state, and certainly not going within, which is the most important thing that must be done. Another aspect of excess in the physical self is over exercising. Going to the gym every day is not necessarily a bad thing, but when you spend an hour or two at the gym every day, you're obsessive about it, then yes, that could end up being, it could work more against you than for you. And of course, another place is going to work every day, and instead of putting in 8 hours, it's a 12 or a 14 or a 16-hour day. And remember, we talked about that last week in terms of self-destruction, where in working all those hours, you end up negating your family, you end up losing out on the kids growing up, you end up not having an intimate relationship, and not necessarily from a physical, sexual level, but intimate in terms of really communicating and sharing. Because one, you work so much, you come home, you're exhausted, you just want to go to bed. So it limits communication. And again, there's got to be a thing there about moderation. Last thing I wrote down there is, what do you expect from others? And what do you expect of others? Do you expect them to keep up with you in the exercise routine? Do you expect them, because you're working 14 hours a week and maybe you own the joint, maybe you're an employee, a manager, and do you expect your employees to be there with you and to sacrifice? Because I worked for a guy like that who believed, he was always about business, and he thought, past tense, you should always be about business. I think, from a moderate point of view, and my attitude has always been at 5:30, I'm done. Even as an owner, come 5:30, I'm done. I do not live to work, I work to live. So examine where you may or may not, but let's say may, be excessive in your approach to your physical self. Now, when we talk about your material self, part of the excessive, in fact, we even have Overeaters Anonymous. The first thing, do you overeat? I'm a nosher. I love to eat. I have a little gut to demonstrate that. I love food. In fact, from a reincarnation point of view, I'm a rapid incarnator, I've been told, because I guess on some levels I really like the material plane. And so I want to come back and enjoy the fruits thereof. So I have a tendency to eat healthy. I eat healthy and I have healthy meals, and not necessarily talking about the organics of it, but the quantity, not the quality. Anyway, so there's a tendency to be excessive. Some people are excessive in terms of not only their food, but also their possessions. And we can see that because our society is set up as a capitalistic system. We are constantly being pushed, programmed to buy, and buy, which is why we have storage units everywhere. In fact, I saw coming back from one of my trips to New Mexico, coming back to San Antonio. In fact, I think it was on the last trip because we haven't, we sold the house, so we're here. But on the last trip back, we saw them building storage units actually miles away from any community. And there must have been 200 units being laid out. Can't even begin to imagine. Point being is that on some levels, hoarders, that true excessiveness, okay? On another level, we're just, do you have more than what you need? Do you keep getting more? These are the things I wrote down. And the question comes up with that, what do you think all of that's going to do for you? And I know we covered that before in the material self, and I don't remember about which particular pattern, but it's something that's pervasive and goes through multiple patterns. And that is, what do you think having more will do for you? Because it really doesn't matter. It's never going to fulfill. If you feel that there's an emptiness within you, then there is nothing you can do. It doesn't matter how excessive you are. You're never going to fill that emptiness until you understand, one, that there is no emptiness. It's just a false perception that you've been led to believe. It is a concept that you have endorsed and grow and it's a concept that you accept and have brought into your being, and you work with it and you believe it to be true even when it's not. So look at, let me go there a minute. My mom was a shopper, period. And you may know people like that. And I think that's excessive. They shop just to shop. It's an entertainment. It's a diversion from self, obviously. And it's compulsive on some levels. They just have to buy something. So question self along the material lines, whether or not you continue to buy things, and if so, why? Do you really need them? Do you need the latest, greatest, bestest ever thing? And what you're replacing, does it need to be replaced? Or does it still function? Does it still do for you? It may not do for you on one level what it did for you when you bought it, but the reality is, the truth of it is, getting past that emotional association with it, does it do for you what it's supposed to do for you from a physical, material, social, spiritual perspective? Noted, I didn't say emotional, because your emotional self, its needs change because of a lack of understanding. Because again, if we go back to, I think we covered it in session 1 or 2, maybe 2 or 3, going through the role of a male and the role of a female. Well, if you really continue to delve into the concepts surrounding your gender and whether or not you're working on approval as a form of acceptance or rejection as a form of acceptance, then you have, then your emotional needs are going to change. Let me rephrase that. They're going to have the appearance of needing different or more, when in reality, they don't, because what you have could work for you. And that way you can be moderate in your usage and not get into the pattern of excess, needing more, wanting more, getting more, and more may not even satisfy what your needs are. So there's that. And of course, I always ask, what are you expecting from others in that regard? So in terms of the social self and excess, one of the things, and I'll go, I have some friends that always need to be with somebody, always need to be out there, always need to be entertaining. It's like at the trade show. Now, trade shows are kind of different because on some levels, you're supposed to mix, and some people need to mix. For some people, it's the only time they can get away. You know, for myself, basically, I disappear at the end of the workday. You know, I'm back in my room. I don't need to be around people. I think in my younger days when I was starting and beginning to understand aspects of myself, then yes, I was out there, I was participating, and I would be out, you know, after dinner. When I'm done dinner, then I'm gone. You know, what else is there to do? But some people need to be around people all the time. They cannot be alone. They're almost afraid of being alone because then they have to deal with themselves. And a lot of people, we've been programmed, again, programming to look outside of ourselves for what we should be having within ourselves. So we need to be around people and be acknowledged, and on some levels, be entertained. And then there's, do you feel obligated to entertain? Do you feel that you have to be the host or the hostess? Do you have to be the life of the party? Do you have to be the one that's considerate of everybody? You know, that would come into the pattern of sacrifice or the pattern of perfection that we've talked about in previous sessions. So the issue, you know, this question was, do you feel obligated to be the one to entertain the family? Because maybe you have more than your cousins or your, you know, aunts, uncles, whatever the case may be. And if so, where else does obligation work in your life? Because if you feel obligated to entertain, then it is a pattern that you have that is at work elsewhere in your reality. So that's worth thinking about and looking to deal, you know, to understanding in each one of yourselves, not only in terms of this particular pattern of behavior, but it in itself is a pattern of behavior. And quite honestly, I don't remember if I wrote that down or not. I know we haven't covered it, but it may be one of the future, because like I said, there are 30 different patterns that I wrote down, and I'm not sure that I got all of them. Anyway, do you expect others to spend time with you? And not necessarily on an emotional level, but again, here we are at a social level. You know, being an owner of a company, you may think, you know, that your employees should spend more time with you at trade shows or at company functions, whatever the case may be. You know, and if you socialize with your employees, do you think that, you know, they should spend more time with you? Worthy questions. And going back to entertainment, the last thing I wrote down is, do you expect others to entertain you? Do you obligate others? You know, one is because in everything it works both ways. Well, not everything. Let me rephrase that. A lot of patterns will obviously get other people involved, where you do project an expectation onto them that they need to, you know, do something for you, which is part of your pattern, but you bring them into your pattern, which is part of your pattern, and to validate your pattern. So the other question here is, do you expect others to entertain you? Do you make people feel obligated to entertain you, obligated to spend time with you? Questions to ponder. Last but not least is the spiritual self. And here, excess, I think, is on some levels harder to see because we think it's the right thing to do. We think by being overly religious, by being pious, by sacrificing self, by volunteering at the church, the synagogue, the center, at the, you know, the grounds, being a volunteer, whatever, to the point that in being excessive, you end up, you know, ignoring or not giving to your emotional self and not giving to your partner because you're giving it to God. and you think that this is the better thing to do. Yet it's taught, and we covered this in Unity way back in previous sessions, that the two must become as one. In Genesis, it talks about the husband and wife, they will cleave to each other and become as one. I think the wife will cleave unto the husband and they will become as one, or the husband to the wife. I don't remember. And Jesus also said somewhere that the two must become as one. And remember that whenever I talk about, and when Jesus talked about, not me, but when Jesus talked about the two becoming one, not only was he talking about the male and female becoming one, because remember, women have testosterone in their body, men have estrogen in their body. So it's a matter of coming to a place of being genderless, because when you make the two one, they are equal, so that you're looking at life not through a male perspective and not through a female perspective, but through a neutral perspective, not shaded by either gender. The other two becoming one is your spiritual self coming in harmony with your material self, so that one is not dominant over the other. And the way the material self becomes the dominant one is because the material self is the one that is seeking to compensate, to validate. I don't know that compensate's the right word, but is the material self is validating what the emotional self believes it should be. Okay? So, spiritual self, overly religious. Now, obviously, overly religious does not necessarily mean spiritual. And, what I wrote down here is go to your place of worship multiple times a week. It's really interesting. Every Sunday morning, I watch Meet the Press, and there was something on there about church going. And it seems that over the last bunch of years, less people are going to the church. And another conversation I had with somebody else, that people were turning away from Christianity and that churches are going up for sale. I mean, not the congregation, but the buildings themselves are going up for sale because people are turning away from their religion. Now, I don't know if that's in Judaism and Buddhism or Shinto or whatever the religion is of Ganesh or Shiva. I don't know, because obviously the show was really more about Christianity, at least in that particular survey. So there's a question there. And I think maybe part of the reason for that is because religion is not fulfilling, man's approach to religion is not fulfilling the needs of the individual on multiple levels. Excess could be also where you are incredibly strict, not only with yourself, but with every member of the family. There are some religious sects that are very, very strict. No dancing, no makeup, no singing, no joy. I can't have it, you shouldn't have it. And some of that excess may also relate to the pattern of denial. Deny yourself pleasure, deny yourself joy, deny yourself love, and be very excessive in your strictness and in the way that you approach life ends up denying you stuff. And again, at the bottom, and this is something that I think we should always ask ourselves, what do we expect of and from others? Something always good to think about. Okay. This next pattern of behavior, and I don't know how we're doing on time. I didn't see the time. Excuse me a minute. Okay. Oh, okay. Only 7:30. We're good to go. Okay. This next one is all about rejection. Now remember that rejection is a mode of acceptance. Remember when we talked about, we all come into the material plane, and I know that I repeat these things, and I do so for a couple of different reasons. One is we hear something and we understand it from an intellectual point of view. It becomes a base of knowledge. Because I was writing something this afternoon about knowledge, because starting in January, every Monday, I will be putting online the life enrichment journey, starting with session 1. So we will always be, 12, I guess 3 months ahead of everybody else. Every Monday, that's Monday, will be life enrichment journey. Every Tuesday, I will do a session on the mind, a completely different point of view. Every Tuesday will be something on the body. Every Wednesday, Tuesday on the mind, Wednesday on the body, Thursday on spirit. Different aspects. And I would suggest, depending upon where you are with the information. Remember, I've always said to you that I think you should take time during the week to work on yourself. These other sessions, they're like 3-5 minutes long, some maybe 6 or 7, and they're all about tying in more of what I understand, more about the teachings. I do think, quite honestly, that they would also cover some of the things that I don't cover here, because it's like what I said about laziness and desperation earlier. I walk away, I put this together a while ago, and in hearing the information, and this is what I would say to you, in hearing this information, you hear it, you get it, you may ponder it, you may take notes on it, you may even go back and listen to it. And I will say this, and you may have downloaded some of my books already. And here's the deal. And maybe you can relate to this, and I'll use the movie Help by the Beatles. I love that movie. I think I saw it 4 or 5 times, just like I've seen Star Wars a half a dozen times. And what's interesting about that is that each time I went back and saw the movie, I picked up on something else, a different line. I heard something differently. I thought about it differently. And so what I'm saying is that if you go back 3 months, go back to session 1, session 2, session 3, and re-listen, it may trigger for you new insights, new understandings. Why? Because from that point till now, your mind has grown, your perception has grown, your understandings have gotten deeper. You know more, you've grown more, you will understand more, you will see things from yet another level. Okay? So, and part of this also, I will throw this out. I need people to carry on this work. I believe, and at the dinner in Orlando with some people, Angie, Jerry, you all were there. I spoke about what I really feel this work is about in the sense of the Essene movement. If you're not familiar with the Essenes, Jesus, Joseph, Mary, John, Elizabeth, Zachariah were all part of the Essene movement. And the whole purpose for the Essene movement, which may have been started by Isaiah, and it was titled The School of Prophets, the whole purpose for that was to raise consciousness, understanding of its members, so that at a point in time, which happened to be 360 years after the beginning, the exact number of degrees in a circle, that at that level and that time, the understanding was evolved enough that a new teacher, Jesus, could come into the world to not only bring the next level of universal teachings to humanity, but also demonstrate the abilities that were concurrent with that level of understanding. So, to me, this work is part of that work, part of that movement, and it may be another 200 years, 300 years before the next level of Christ consciousness evolves. And I think on some levels that it could be a couple, because it may very well be that that is what will be needed at the time. Remember that Jesus manifested during a period of a patriarchal society where the male was dominant. You may have heard me say that I believe we're moving towards a matriarchal society. And so maybe in another 100 years, God will be a woman. It'll be a goddess as opposed to a guy, a father figure. And it may very well be that as we continue to evolve in our understandings, that it will manifest as a couple showing true equality and that level of consciousness. So with that in mind, part of what I'm hoping for is to find people who are as committed, who see the value of what the teachings can do for them, and to see the value of continuing this work, building on this work, recruiting others to do this work. And the work is going within. There's the teaching in Matthew, make for the straight gate, narrow is the way that leads to life, and fewer they are who find it. Jesus also taught that the kingdom of God is within. The whole purpose here is to go within. So I'm hoping to have a group, a core group, and you all may be it, to help set a foundation of being a part of what I believe is the movement is already underway. Even though I don't know of anyone else that's out there approaching the information at this level, that is all designed to turn you on to yourself as opposed to believing in me, believing in this, believing in that, but to go within. And so I'm hoping that this is reaching you, that you want to do this, that you want to be part of the core center, and that at some point you will participate with me in building and supporting the promotion of this work and teaching this work. Having said that, I will move on to rejection. So, in the emotional self, one of the ways, and it's really interesting because you can hear this in people, they will always make jokes at their own expense. So what I wrote down is, do you attack yourself? Do you denigrate yourself? Do you make jokes about yourself? Okay? And that is negating yourself. I had two guys working for me at one point as an educator and a sales manager, and they were forever attacking each other. Now, when that happens, it's from a different point of view. Both of them were into rejection, because you pull it out of people. If you need to be rejected, you will create a situation to bring that about, because that is something that you need. Now, it may not be something you need every day, every week, every month, every year, but every now and then there will be a cycle that would come up in your life where you need rejection. Obviously, if that happens, rejection is a part of your reality. It is part of your mode of acceptance. It is something that is woven throughout your life. What you need to do is, by understanding that you've got this particular pattern at work, is try to identify all the little ways that it works against you, like in attacking yourself, putting yourself down. And you do this in front of others. I mean, you may also do it in your own mind when you're alone, but more often than not, you're going to do this when you are with others. And on another level, you will draw it out of others. You will do something, with your partner, with your coworkers, because coworkers don't fall under the social self kind of thing, because when you're working with somebody and you spend a lot of time with somebody, there is an emotional connection, because we are all part of the same great energy, part of the God force. And because of that, we are connected. And so from that connection point, you may, if you're in a pattern of rejection and you're needing rejection, because remember, rejection makes you feel good. Rejection makes you feel loved. It's part of your mode of acceptance. So if you're needing to be rejected, you're going to do something. You're going to say something. You're going to act in a particular way. Maybe you've got a habit that turns people off, turns people away. It's all in needing that rejection. So take a look at that. See how it may be working in your emotional self. In your physical self, one of the ways is that, you may find that you hurt yourself more often than not. I mean, some people hurt themselves, once a year. Some people hurt themselves once a week. Some, once a day. They're doing something to bang into something, bang into a desk, drop something on their hands, their feet, whatever. But they do something to literally hurt themselves. I don't want to say constantly, but frequently enough that if it's you, then wow, yeah, okay, yes, that's at work in my life. It would help you, again, to understand some of the ways that I wrote down here about hurting self, especially if you do construction work, you got a habit or a hobby where you're using your hands, you could end up hurting yourself. Cutting yourself. You're working in the kitchen, you cut your fingers. Now, normally you wouldn't think twice about it, and it may not necessarily be rejection, okay? Because let's say you're chopping tomatoes and you cut yourself. Well, you have to ask first and foremost, if we were in a conversation and you said to me, last night I was preparing dinner and I cut myself. My first question to you would be, which hand? Your right hand or your left hand? And then my second question would be, which finger? Okay. Now, the reason I want to know that, and those are the two questions you should ask yourself. And the reason I want to know that, and the reason you want to know that, is so that you can understand what you're going through. See, your left hand deals with your material reality, how you're handling what you're going through. So if you cut your left hand, obviously there's something going on where you do not feel you have a handle on it. You do not feel that you can control it. Now, if it was your right hand, then obviously there's an element of faith in self, and that you may not feel you have the wherewithal to be able to handle it, to control it. So then I say, okay, what finger? So if you tell me your thumb represents your will. Try to grab something and hold on to it without using your thumb. Very difficult, if not impossible. So you need your will to manifest your control, to manifest your power. If it's your pointing finger, this is your emotional finger. This is the finger we use to blame everybody else for what's going on. It's your fault, her fault, his fault, their fault, my parents' fault, my kids' fault. But do this right now. Point at something, doesn't matter what. Now look at your hand. You'll see that 3 fingers are folded in, and in reality, they're pointing back at you. You are the cause. Whatever is manifesting in your life, you are co-creating it as an opportunity to learn something from it. Okay? If it's your middle finger, you know which one. That's the one people give you. When anybody ever gives me the middle finger, I say, thank you, because that's the finger of aspiration. That's why it's the longest finger in your hand. But if you were to cut that finger, then I would say you're going through doubt about the ability to move forward, either materially or emotionally or socially or spiritually. If it's the right hand, you know, left hand is material. So there's something about aspiration that's an issue. If it's your 4th finger, that's where you wear your wedding band, your school ring. That's considered your social finger. So if it's the social finger that gets cut, again, materially, it could be a business deal. There's something going on. It could be your relationship, you know, because that's where the wedding band is. So there's something going on there. If it's in your right hand, then again, it's something social, whether or not you have faith in yourself to handle an upcoming, because remember, let's go there a minute. Symbols are both current and precognitive. Now, what I mean by precognitive is that you're already in a particular pattern, and your mind has already been giving you guidance, giving you symbols to look at. However, because, you know, we're all in a hurry, we got this to do, we got that to do, we got to be here, we got to be there, I got this project, I got that project. We are so distracted by inconsequential life because we've put more importance on the external than on the internal. And so the external has us very distracted. And by the way, that in itself is a pattern of behavior, but we're very distracted. And so we don't take the time to stop and think. Okay. So anyway, there's things going on, and you need to stop and think. You need to question these things because you're in a pattern. Your mind is saying, I've given you all these symbols. You're not paying attention. Okay. You got to cut yourself. It beats breaking something, you know, a bone, but you got to cut yourself because you've got to know that what's upcoming is going to be painful, is going to hurt you. Now, another thing comes into play. And the reason that you cut yourself was because knowing your mind, let me rephrase that, your mind knowing where you are, which particular pattern of behavior is at work, your mind is using retrocognition, universal teaching, we look back in order to see ahead. So your mind is using retrocognition to look back to see how you handled this in the past. So your mind will give you symbols to hopefully capture your attention, make you stop and think about how you handled this in the past so you can change your attitude and change the way you handle it in the future. That's why the cutting is precognitive. It's saying to you, if you don't change, this is what's going to happen. But I'm going to give you a symbol to help you understand what the potential is. It's up to you to examine, understand, alter, you know, understand not only what you're going through, where it's coming from, but what is the final result? What is the expectation associated with this pattern? So that in knowing that, you can change the outcome into what you want. Okay. So another way of rejection is fighting. You may pick an argument with your spouse, with your partner, over nothing. Doesn't really matter. What needs to be understood is that if you have the need for rejection, you will find a way. The mind is fabulous. It will always find a way. And that way will be rational, logical, and justifiable. And you will set it in motion to get what you want, period. Okay? So the fighting can start out, this is why Jesus said, it's not what you eat that defiles you, it's what proceeds from the heart. It's the things you say. You can say to somebody, I hate your guts. Well, once you say that, it's out of the bag. You can't bring that back, and you've hurt that person. Done. Can't retract it, ever. And eventually, fighting could lead you to the ultimate form of rejection, which I have down at the bottom of the slide. And death is the ultimate form of rejection. And some people choose that as a way out. That's where suicide comes in. It's really rejecting self, not, I almost said not honoring self. And I don't know, because there have been a couple of suicides in my family tree, my brother-in-law and a cousin. So from an observation point of view, I think people who end up committing suicide are coming from a place of just unbelievable pain, where they don't feel that they can deal with life from a position of strength any longer. They have, on some levels, lost their personal power, feel overwhelmed, and can't deal with it. I think that, I think we can all overcome our patterns of behavior, no matter what they are. It takes an enormous amount of effort. One of the keys that was taught to me, and I will tell you in all honesty, is very difficult to do. It's difficult to maintain. Let me go there. It's difficult to maintain. And that is having a continuous conscientious awareness. So it's what to strive for, and I do. I do try to read my symbols. I do try to understand my dreams. And every now and then, you get a real epiphany, and you're like, wow, okay, I got it. I really got it. Now I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to go there anymore. I don't have to be that anymore, because I got it. Now, just because you get it, and I think I used this example last week, and that is, just because you get it doesn't mean that your emotional self is going to let you keep it. And what I mean by that is the example of putting water in a sieve. You can put water in a sieve, and like your ego, it will find any opening it possibly can. Okay? So I see it's 8 o'clock. We're going to stop here. And next week, we will get into the material self, but something to think about. And we'll go from there. And again, if anybody has any questions about anything, do not hesitate to write to me, and we'll deal with it, and we'll get into it, and hopefully share some insights and understandings that will help you master whatever the situation is you're trying to deal with. So on that note, I will say thank you for your attendance this evening, and hopefully you've gotten some refreshers and some good stuff out of this, and we'll go from there. So thank you all for your attendance. Good night, everybody.
Good night, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night. Good night, Michael. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good night, Joan.